Hey guys, JK Wargames, and today we're going to have a look at Oathmark Battles of the Lost Age, written by Joseph A. McCulloch. Now I have to say a massive thanks to Osprey Games for sending this to the channel for review. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so getting into the rules. The first main things we come across is playing the game. And here we're talking about figures. And these are the stat lines. So you can see here this is a human soldier. Now the first box there is an A, and this is their activation stat. So it's a 5 to activate. Their movement is 6, their fight is 2, their shoot is 0, their defense is 9, their combat dice is 1, and their health is 1. And then obviously there's points and special rules. Now Oathmark uses a D10 system, and basically players roll 2d10 to activate a unit, and it's an alternative activation system. So you'd roll 2d10 and you just need 1 5 or more on one of the dice, and that unit would activate, and then that unit would do its actions, and then your opponent would attempt to activate one of their units. The artwork in the book is absolutely fantastic. As you can see, this orc warrior here, absolutely amazing. So going into units and unit sizes, you can see here unit sizes are on 25 by 25 millimeter bases, and they consist of 1 to 20 figures, but they must be in rows of 5. So this is pretty standard for rank and flank games. And then obviously the cavalry are on 25 by 50 millimeter, and they are organized into a width of 5 as well. Then we get larger creatures and monsters. So it's pretty simple how to rank up your units. Now, if you're not used to playing a rank and flank game, your unit is treated like one big block. So you can see here we're talking about facings. So you've got a front facing, a left flank, a right flank, and your rear. And when you're playing the game, you never really want to be charged in the flank or the rear. You want to try and keep your front facing to your opponent, which isn't the easiest thing once you get playing. So you're not using individual figures. Each figure is represented as one big unit. Again, look at this elf archer, absolutely fantastic artwork. So initiative is really cool in the game. Each player rolls 2d10, and whoever gets the highest on a single dice has the initiative. Now, if players roll a double, if one of the players roll a double on their dice, a special event will happen, and then you're going to roll on a chart and a special event or catastrophic event will happen, and it can really add some spice to the game. Then we go here with more artwork and talking about multiplayer games. Then we get into actions. So you can see here it says once activated, a unit may take up to 2 actions. Now, a move is a basic move. So a unit could move, human infantry could move 6 inches, and that's 1 action. If they wanted to move again, they can, but they halve their movement, so they would move 3 inches. So the other thing is that you can use maneuvers in the game. So if we just go through to maneuvers, a maneuver costs an action. So you can see that here it says no unit may make more than 1 maneuver per activation. So maneuvers are pivoting. So the unit pivots on the spot. So for instance, if you moved up 6 for 1 action, and then you pivot the unit, that's your second action, and that's your 2 actions for your activation on that unit. Or you can wheel the unit, which is where during a wheel, a unit changes direction by swinging like a door, it says here, with one corner of the unit changing as a hinge. So it's a way of wheeling round terrain. So movement, you have to really think about what you're doing. So you can either pivot or wheel for a maneuver, and that costs you an action. The next action is shooting. So a unit armed with missile weapons may spend 1 action to shoot. Pretty simple. So you could move up your one movement for one action and then shoot. Now, if a unit fails its activation, so you do your 2d10 roll, if you fail to meet your activation stat, the unit can only perform a simple action. And here you can see it says a unit that fails its activation roll may only take one simple action during its activation. Simple actions include maneuvers, move actions, provided the move does not take the unit into contact with an enemy unit, and shooting, but you will have penalties for shooting. So you want to be trying to pass your activations as much as possible. Now, combat's an interesting one. There is actually no charge action in the game, but it's called a move into combat. So if you moved your unit in their movement and they make contact with the enemy, then they are considered to be in combat. Even if you move your two moves, so you move your standard move, then a half move, and you make contact with the enemy, that is considered to be a combat. Now, once units are in combat, we go into the combat phase. So, both sides, the active opponent and the enemy, fight at the same time, but we have to determine how many combat dice you get. And normally this is going to be 5. You can see here, it says, first both players must determine how many combat dice to roll in the round. For units that are facing each other, simply take the combat dice stat for one figure in the unit and multiply it by the number of figures in the front rank to a maximum of 5. Now, then the unit will work out what they need to hit. Now, this is where things get a bit unique and different to other games. A unit will take its fight stat and then minus that from the enemy's defense stat. So for instance, if we had a human soldier with a fight stat of 2 and they were fighting a unit of ogres who have a defense of 11, they now need a 9 because they've taken 2 off 11. However, there are other modifiers. So here you can see for each full rank, you get a -1, so it's making it easier. So let's say we had a full rank, that now takes us down to an 8. If we were attacking on the flank or rear, that takes us down to a 7. So we need 7 or more on any of the dice. However, you can see here, a non-active unit has already activated this turn. So if you had already activated and you've been charged, you're getting a +1 to what you need to hit. And then if you're disordered, you're getting a +1, so it's harder. And once you get that stat, you roll the dice, and for any of the hits, you remove casualties. The interesting thing though is that you're not necessarily just going to get one hit. So you can see here, determine hits. Equals or exceeds the target number, you're going to get one hit. Equals or exceeds target number by 5, you're going to get 2 hits. Equals or exceeds the target number by +10, you're going to get 3 hits. So there's a really good chance that you could get more than one hit and cause some real damage on a unit. There are no saves in the game, so once a hit is applied, a casualty is removed. However, if a unit has more than one wound, then wounds are applied to that enemy until they have enough hits on them to remove them as a casualty. Then we work out who has won the combat. However, if a unit takes casualties, it must take a morale test, which we'll talk about in a minute. And whoever wins the combat can choose if they want to push back the enemy by 1 inch or push them back 6 inches. So if you cause quite a few casualties on the enemy, you could push them back just 1 inch, hope you get the initiative next turn, and then you only have to move in 1 inch to make contact with them. Or if you move them back 6 inches because you took quite a few casualties, hopefully you get the initiative and then you can move further away from them. So I like that in the game, it's quite unique. So morale. So the dreaded morale test. Basically, any unit that takes a casualty, whether it be from shooting or combat, has to take a morale test. And you roll 2d10 and you need to meet your activation stat. However, there are a few modifiers. So you can see here, for the number of casualties suffered, it's a -1 for each casualty. The unit is disordered is a -1. And then you have some modifiers that could help you to complete ranks. And if it's from a shooting attack, you get a +1. Now, if you fail your morale test, then you are disordered. And you can see here, when a unit is disordered, it receives a -1 to all activation rolls. If a disordered unit fails its activation roll, it remains disordered. And basically, units that are disordered can't really do much. They they have lots of modifiers, and if they have to make another morale test while they are still disordered and they fail that, they are broken. So being disordered is not a good thing. But we've had a couple of games, and units disordered is a real problem, because you have cascading panic. And basically, once a unit routes and it's within 8 inches of another unit, that unit has to make a morale test. And just say, for instance, that unit that is within 8 inches is already disordered and they fail, that's another unit wiped out. So all of a sudden, halfway into the game, units are dropping like flies because of this cascading panic. So it doesn't always pay to keep your units close to each other. So at its core, Oathmark is actually quite a simple game. You have those core mechanics of activating units, alternate activations, moving into combat, shooting. All pretty simple stuff. But then this is where the game starts to shine, and you can add in advanced rules. Now you can add in as many of these as you want, and this really starts to give the game some flavor. So here the rules are talking about characters that you can add to units, and they all have special abilities. So commanders, you can see here it says if a character has a special ability command, it is a commander and is subject to 2 special rules. First, when you make an activation roll, when you make an activation roll or morale test for any friendly unit that contains a figure within 6 inches of the unit that contains a commander, that unit gets to roll 1 extra die. So you'd be rolling 3 dice to try and activate, which is really nice. And then he can also try to activate up to 2 more units that are within 6 inches. So potentially you're activating 3 units with 1 activation from your commander. So commanders are definitely worth taking. Also, look at the artwork on this dwarf here. It's absolutely fantastic. Now, in our games that we played, we've had a couple of games, we added champions, and this added some really nice flavor. So you have a champion in a unit, and basically the champion gets a champion dice. So let's say you're rolling your normal 5 dice, your 5d10, you take one of those away and add in a different colored die, which is called the champion die. And basically, you can see here that the champion die causes more hits than a normal die. So it gives you an opportunity to cause more damage because your champion is a hero and he's better in combat. So this is another thing we had as well, death of an officer. So you can see here, when using the basic rules, it is impossible for a unit to lose its officer during play, as the officer is always the last figure to be removed from a unit. However, when using advanced rules, an opposing champion can kill an officer or a character that is acting as a unit's officer. And this has some real impact on the unit. So you can see here, players roll only 1 die during morale tests, which is not very good, and activation rolls as well. For units without an officer, unless the unit is within 6 inches of a friendly unit that contains a character with a command ability, in which case they roll 2 dice. This includes the morale test generated by a melee or shooting attack in which an officer is killed. So losing an officer adds some tension to the game, and that unit will start to really struggle. You know, using 1 dice as opposed to 2 or 3 for activations and morale tests, you're definitely handicapped. Then we get into spellcasters, which are really cool. So obviously this is fantasy, you're going to have some wizards in there, and each spellcaster you can have different levels. So they go from level 1 to level 5, and basically the levels mean how many spells they know, and you can use spells, and basically you activate your wizard with an activation roll as always, and then they can potentially try and cast some of their spells. So this is where Oathmark really starts to shine. So building an army. Now, there are no set army lists in this book. There are individual units and characters that you can choose, and there are point limits and there are some restrictions, but there are no set army lists. You know, it doesn't say you must have this, you must have this. You are almost at a free rein to add what you want within the restrictions. And also the other thing is that different races can form an army together. So for instance, I could fight with humans and dwarfs versus orcs and elves. So, you know, you really can, if you've got a large collection of fantasy, you can mix and match armies, which I think is a really cool thing, definitely unique to this game. For those of you who like your campaigns, basically you can create a kingdom. Now, we haven't done this, so I'm not going to talk about it too much, but basically you create a kingdom which has 5 regions, and you're going to be fighting over these regions in the campaign, trying to take your opponent's regions and gain different terrain types. Now, you choose terrain types, and that gives you access to certain units in the game. So you can see here, a dwarf terrain list. A dwarf city gives you a lot of stuff. Mountain passes give you access to dwarf border guard, etc. Now, my understanding is that during a campaign game, if you are the winner, you can you're fighting for different territories and different regions, so you are trying to open up more territory to gain more units and potentially take units from your enemies. But I will do another video on kingdoms because we haven't got that far yet. We've only played a couple of games. So this is where we get into the units. Again, I know I keep saying it, but absolutely fantastic artwork. So we've got dwarfs here, and we start with the dwarf king. And as we talked about earlier, you can see all the activation stats, the movement stats, and then they get all their special rules in there and how many points it costs. So a dwarf king is 322 points, which is quite expensive. And then you get a dwarf prince, dwarf general. So these are all your characters. So you've got quite a lot to choose from. And then you get your spellcasters. This is what I was talking about, the different levels, but they can be quite expensive. And then you get into dwarf soldiers, dwarf spearmen, dwarf archers, dwarf warriors. So lots of different units to use, lots of different options here. And then we get into humans. So we get into special abilities, and most of the units and characters have some form of special ability. So you can see here, champion. If a unit with a champion engages in melee combat, the player rolls the champion dice as one of their combat dice. Charge. Unit receives -1 to its target number for each level. So cavalry have a level of 3, so they bring their target number down by 3. So cavalry, heavy cavalry, sorry, are very good in the game. And then we get all sorts here. Courage, a figure with courage adds it to its level to all morale tests, so that can help you out. And these are all laid out nicely in the rule book. Not going to go through them all. Shielding, we'll just talk about that very quickly. Basically, you can remove dice from your opponent's hands. So if you shielded as an enemy unit in combat, you reduce your opponent's dice to 4 if they had 5. But you also have to reduce your dice, so it's a choice you have to make. So I really like that. So that's the special abilities. More fantastic artwork. Really like that image. And then we get spells. So as I said about spells earlier, you choose your spells, and this is the number you need to try and get that spell off. So you activate the spellcaster as normal on their activation stat, and then you'd roll 2d10, needing a 6 to get that spell off. Now these are the general spells that you can choose from, but then armies, races have their own individual spells, which gives some more flavor to the game. We really found the spells to be good, but not too powerful. So, you know, they're not going to win you the game, but they definitely add some nice flavour to it and help your armies. And then getting to towards the back of the rulebook, we have some nice quick reference sheets. So we've got the combat modifier table, shooting modifier table, missile weapon table, hit determination table, morale tests, artillery modifier table. And then this is what you use for the campaign. This is going to be your regions you mark out. So that is, and some army rosters that you can fill in yourself. You could photocopy these. So all in all, a lovely little rule set. And if you're looking for something a bit different to the standard rank and flank games, I think there's enough flavor and unique mechanics in this game to provide you with some great entertainment. The first game we played, we just used the basic rules and we're learning the game, picked it up very quickly. The second game, we added in some of the advanced rules and the spellcasters, and it was just a joy to play. So definitely a rule set worth looking at. Now, Osprey and North Star military figures sent me some miniatures, so I'm just going to show you one of the miniatures that I painted up from them. Okay guys, so this is one of the miniatures that was sent, and this is a elf wizard. Now, really nice sculpts. Been really impressed, and they were a pleasure to paint. The horse sculpt's really nice on this. Lovely model. So this is North Star figures, and yeah, they're fantastic. Now, obviously there's lots in the range. There's humans, dwarfs, undead, orcs, and they've sent me some orc goblins, wizards and things like that, commands, but I only wanted to show you what I painted up so you get the real effect. But yeah, fantastic. So it's a thumbs up for me. I hope you've enjoyed this video and a look at the Oathmark rules. If you're on the fence about it, then I hope this helps you make a decision. And if you like the video, make sure to comment, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.